Okay, so we're back. I'm wanting to cover the documentary, the Frontline documentary that I had you look at, Facing Death, made in 2010, whereby we're considering this idea of end-of-life care and how is it that this end-of-life technology presents a problem for us and our family members in terms of mortality, right? And also in terms of suffering and likewise the decision making thereof. So how is it that we're thinking of this idea that nobody wants to die while at the same time nobody wants to die badly, right? So that sounds rather straightforward, but when we're faced with these decisions, such decisions can become extremely expensive, and then likewise such decisions can also cost people in terms of suffering as well. So there's a lot of pain that could arrive from watching a loved one being kept alive unnecessarily. The treatments that also are very costly could also cause a lot of pain. So how is it that we're negotiating through that? And so one of the things that I'm having you do by way of the assignment that's upcoming is to start thinking of how it is that you would start advising a family member or the dying patient in terms of what we've learned already by way of the different philosophical thinkers to help patients to gain better wisdom in these decisions, as difficult as they are, right? Because oftentimes these are reduced to these very painful decisions that we have to make for ourselves, but also we could be potentially making those decisions for loved ones who did not talk to us about them before they died, or who did assign us as healthcare proxy, etc., right? And so we have this idea of prolonging life, and then also we also tie in the idea of improving life as well. So in other words, how expensive does a question like that bear on our decision-making processes, right? So in other words, patients are facing overwhelming odds, and the question is, how much can they afford, not only economically, but emotionally, to face this idea of overcoming odds, right? That in other words, oftentimes patients, when they are faced with terminal disease, see this idea of taking faith in overcoming odds, but likewise in that taking faith to overcome odds, they're also having to face a lot of suffering in this attempt to be the very low percentage of people who survive the illness, but yet at the same time, we can't diminish that idea that patients should at least try every vantage possible in the name of saving their lives, right? So this idea of uncertainty is also an idea of facing probabilities, what is possible. In other words, what is possible also starts decreasing as the uncertainties become more certain in terms of facing death. So in other words, we have the inevitability of death, but yet we also have the possibility that technology presents to people, and that possibility that technology presents to people becomes rather ambiguous and very hard to understand, because the technology can also bring a lot of pain and also expense as well. So we were looking at patients with leukemia who were facing bone marrow transplants, and when we were looking at how it is that the doctors were understanding this, a few of the doctors were exposing that this idea that while they're working with their patients, they're also having to work through this idea that there's also a percentage who will die just from the very treatment itself, the radiation treatment and the bone marrow transplants, etc. and understanding how it is that they're helping families through the risks and the percentages that they're facing in these end-of-life decisions, right? And management of care. So, in other words, people are having to face death from the treatment of the disease, while at the same time they're facing the decision of also, is this treatment also something that I could afford, while at the same time, is this treatment also something that's going to bring my loved one a lot of pain as a result? And do I want to face that, right? Becomes a really tough question for people to face. It's very scary to do nothing as opposed to accepting treatment. And then question is when to stop, right? So you can start seeing that there's this way of thinking that's developing where we're thinking of life, we're thinking of how it is that we're facing disease, we're thinking of the complication that advanced technology presents, and likewise suffering and pain. And how is it that we're negotiating through all of that in our decision-making process for ourselves and our loved ones that we're hopefully trying to help, right? And so in other words, am I doing the right thing for my loved one or myself as well? And these have an ambiguity whereby we don't always have the right answer, right? And technology gives us this illusion that we have an answer, when actually what is being presented in the documentary is that the technology actually complicates the answer. It's not as sure to then have end-of-life care be something whereby we just throw all the technology we can at it and have that be an easy solution, because we are still facing the very possibility that people could die from the treatments, and then likewise that they could die from the disease as well, right? Which is a very realistic issue. And so I think that all of these issues are brought up in the documentary in a way that I want you to start thinking about how it is that you would advise the patients and likewise even healthcare professionals in light of the various philosophers' theories that we've looked at in terms of facing death. And so what I'm thinking of doing is having points of criteria whereby when you are taking on the advice, in other words, when you are working with how it is that you're going to write about this and consider it, that you touch on key points that each philosopher brings up so as to meet guidelines and requirements thereof in your advice as well in terms of this end-of-life care and problems with technology, etc. So I think that that's probably the best I could offer right now in terms of prepping us for the assignment. So why don't we take it from there, and I'll continue to talk, and we'll have some more work throughs in our Zoom meetings, and I'll talk to you later. Okay? So thanks.